right. So today we're talking to our business owners. And as your business balance sheet continues to grow, as your company grows, there's some excitement and intrigue in reinvesting all of your capital into this engine that is fueling your business. And yet we, as certified financial planners, have a look into your personal balance sheet. And so we want to talk to those business owners who have found themselves in a position or they're grappling with how much do they continue reinvesting in their business and how is that impacting their personal balance sheet?
That's right. And I think when people are startups, when you're early on, the sentiment for most entrepreneurs is the money just goes into the business, right? You just keep growing. You just keep putting the money back in. But in a healthy trajectory of a business cycle, there's a moment where an entrepreneur needs to start thinking, how is this business benefiting me as an owner? And what else can I do? Like, what else can I do that's strategic to save taxes, strategic to really, fuel their growth, but also setting themselves up for future success?
Yep, absolutely. And we get it, right? Like any startup, especially if we're talking to founders right now, you are putting blood, sweat, and tears into getting a concept up and off the ground. And once you start to receive traction and things are growing, of course, right? The natural response would be to continue to feed that engine, continue to grow. Let's see how far we can take this. And yet there becomes a point in time where that idea of 30 years from now, when I'm ready to retire, I'm going to sell this thing for 10 times what it's worth today. I'm going to sell this thing for, let's just, $80 million 30 years from now. That's what I'm planning for. And so all my reinvestment is going towards that. Well, let's talk about some of the risks, as a counterpoint to that kind of mindset.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of folks, this future is uncertain, right? We don't know. Will your industry thrive in all the way you think? Will your industry, not even just your business, maybe you're doing the best you can and you're thriving, but will your industry go by the wayside? And what was this beautiful retirement plan that's going to 80 million, goes up to 8, goes up to 10 million, goes up to 12 million, and then goes down to 1 or 0.
Mm-hmm.
Not because the business fails, just because that industry has changed. I mean, that's one. The second is family succession. We see this a lot. Someone builds a really successful business. It's moving forward. The next generation graduates college. What they go out and work other places and realize, wow, what mom and dad built or what mom built or dad built, that's so valuable. I think I can get back involved in their business and be the future of that. And parents are thrilled. They're so excited. And the next generation comes in, they're mentoring, they're training, they're going to take this over. And then mom and dad realize we don't have any retirement. We can't stop working. We actually can't give you the business or sell you the business without a really large amount of money coming back to us. Some businesses don't fit both those salaries, the parents' generation and the next generation. And so it really ties people's hands to say, if the original plan was to exit, like by selling the business, and you've built it in such a way that that becomes your only option because you've reinvested all your money back in the business, you're really stuck to that. And the markets change on you. If your goals change, with bringing family members in, any of that, you're really stuck in a hard situation.
So if ultimately the future valuation of your company goes sideways, you found yourself in a position where you have an potentially illiquid asset, your company itself, and, you haven't really diversified. So you have all your eggs in that one basket. And even though things look really optimistic at this juncture where you may stand, it's not guaranteed. I mean, let's talk about the impact that AI is having across multiple industries, right? So it is reinventing so many ways that people do business, the efficiency within multiple industries. So even if you have a technology that you believe or a service or a product that you believe will still stand the duration of time, the industry itself or the way that that product is manufactured or how it's sold, how goods will come to market could be completely different 20 to 30 years, or let's be honest, a year from now. Right? So before we get there, I mean, real talk, right? Things are changing so fast. When we sit down with a founder and or a business owner, maybe even of more than one company, we're not just interested in how do we maximize the value of your business. We want to make sure that we're looking at it through the lens of how are we maximizing your personal balance sheet as well. And ultimately thinking about a time when you're not dependent on income from the business, retirement, right?
Yep. So good. Well, and that's great. I think that kind of lines us up with the situation. This is where we're at, right? We got the good introduction. Here, I think is a helpful framework and some examples. So good framework is to maximize. First step is how do we maximize your tax savings? How do we maximize things like retirement plans that really bring down your taxable income? Like these are just good business choices as they're starting to build your personal side as well. So maximize and harvest, pulling some of the money out of the business into your personal side. And then finally, you want to multiply. Why don't you expand into very different diversified assets? We've talked on, I think, on this podcast before that growing and growth often comes from a concentration in stocks, concentration in one business. You pool your assets together to really make something happen. But as you get down the road, the way you preserve wealth is to diversify it, to spread it out. And so there should be, for most entrepreneurs, a very natural cycle of concentrating, building, growing, and then diversifying and spreading. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they get stuck in that concentration area, and they keep going for decades. They're concentrated. It's all in the business. So we want them to spread out. So I guess a few examples or stories. We had a client who is in the personal real estate type space. He was a mortgage broker or a real estate broker and a mortgage broker, at both. And we encouraged him every couple of years, you should buy a property for yourself, not just for the business, because he's out there, he's in the market, he knows what good properties are, he's really serving his clients. So he took that to heart. And so every 3 or 4 years, he would look to buy a new property. He used the money he's built in his business, use his income to buy another property, take a mortgage and go down that route. Well, fast forward 20 years later, he's now in a position where he has 5 or 6 paid for properties. And when he exited his business, he has plenty of cash flow that he's built over the years. So whether he would
From
to
rental
sell
income from those properties. Yeah.
that's right, whether he were to sell his business or just exit, he had this really bright future. So that's just one, I think, example of initially he had to build his agency, but as he started building forward, he started taking these small steps every year to harvest a bit and reinvest it into something else that would really benefit his future.
One of the things that business owners think about is like, well, my company's growing 20% a year or whatever. Pick a number.
Mm,
Let's say you've had exponential growth, 20 to 30%, 10%, et cetera. And you're looking at that value. You could be measuring it in a number of different ways. And a lot of times what we're not taking into consideration is those taxes, right? So when we're comparing taking those funds and potentially reinvesting them in your business or investing them somewhere else. It could just be traditional stock market type investing. It could be in an alternative real estate. It could be in a different business, right? We want to make sure that when you're looking at return, you're looking at net, real after tax return on investment. And this comes up a lot with people who own property or a business where they're just looking at kind of the gross figures. And it's not until we sit down together to say, let's take a look at how that entity would be taxed, how it is being taxed, what the investment has been on your behalf, right? So what are the real ROI figures when you're talking about where to reinvest your dollars?
yeah, that's right. And those aren't always clear. When you talk about your revenue growth in a company, what costs of goods sold did came with that? And is inflation eating at your margins? Do you have to hire more employees? And so there's times where when you get to the bottom line for a business owner, we've had a number that had their best sales ever, right? Their best year, get down the bottom line and their profits are not that much different just because of the operational realities. But the harder thing is when we look at then their personal life and they say, actually, like we feel tighter. We don't feel we're any better. Even though we just had the best year we've ever had, we don't feel like our personal life is any different. And that's not something that gets fixed in a heartbeat. Oh, make this one silver bullet and things are better. That's what takes planning to say, okay, over the next 5 years, as the business is growing, as you're putting your time and effort there, how do we want the money to flow in a way that's going to save you some taxes and potentially loosen up your budget so you have the ability to live into not just your future income, but also your present income in a way that adds real value to you and your family. And it's a balance. There's some businesses that the main limitation is just capital for growth. We had a client that would import sweaters and clothing material, and they would sell them on Amazon. That was kind of their structure. And their biggest slowdown every year was they just needed more money to buy more product. They were seasonal, so it was a Christmas season product they had. And so the more that they could get over, the more they could sell. And then the next year they'd max out everything, get as much as they could, then they sell it again. And the capital was their biggest slowdown. I feel like that's kind of odd. There's a lot of businesses where it's finding clients, it's finding sales is their slowest. But whatever the business struggle is, that's something that you as a business owner are equipped to solve. But how do we get those proceeds? How do we get that benefit to you personally? So we talked about one real estate. I'll throw in one more real estate example. We have another client that ran a business, a successful business, and was getting a bit older and decided he wanted to retire. But it wasn't that he wanted to sell the business out. He wanted to, in essence, give it. He ended up selling it, but give it to his employees. He said they've
Yeah,
been
first
great.
opportunity, he wanted to give it to his employees. He cared about them. Yeah.
He's like, they're the ones who have carried me through these years. They've built this to where it is. And so he looked at what it would look like to exit his business and to, sell it for, when I say give it, sell it for a very, in my mind, nominal value for what it could be. And it was interesting in doing the numbers that for him, he had done some good steps along the way. He had built up his personal accounts. He had built up his retirement. He actually owned the building in which the business operated in, and he owned it free and clear. He had paid off the mortgage. So again, that's not something you do 1 year at a time. He'd done that over decades of running the business, buying the building, paying off those mortgages. So he got to a point where he was able to sell the business very inexpensively to to his team, to his
So
employees.
below, arguably below fair market value for his
Yeah, way
business,
way
but for
below.
him, it was kind of a legacy. It was an emotional decision because he wanted to honor the work that his employees had done.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a good moment. But in them buying it from him, he was able to accomplish that because he owned the building, so he knew he'd get a stream of rents. He had other resources. Had he instead, changing the past, had he used that business and kept growing it and growing it, he would then have an asset that one was it was all tied up. All his money was in that one asset. He wouldn't be able to sell it to his employees for a reasonable amount, and he would have to sell it to a third party, some private equity group, and they may or may not keep those employees. So it's a real beautiful moment of that pre-planning allowed him to really build the legacy he wanted
Yep.
without a problem.
So I think this segues really nicely into we have kind of just a basic like trifold approach to a business owner considering where they should reinvest their dollars. And the first is to maximize the benefit that you have as an owner. So while you're working there, while you're earning an income, let's talk systematically about how and when to increase owner distributions, for example, or stock redemption agreements, right? How those can work in your favor so that you're freeing up capital so that you call the shots. You make the decision when and how to reinvest those funds. So, really, the first
hmm
step is kind of maximizing the value that you have today from your business.
And that includes K type stuff. A lot of folks think of 401ks or retirement plans as a future me, and it is. There's a benefit for your retirement. There's also a real benefit to pulling down those tax numbers, to being able to preserve some of that income for a future year without lowering your tax bill. So it's a future value. It's also a current benefit.
Yep. And that's really kind of the second phase is we want to look at protection, right? Protection of the asset that you have as a business owner. And so a lot of that has to do with tax, right? Are we thinking strategically about your taxes over the duration of your life? So utilizing qualified retirement plans, that has to do with what type of company you hold. What we find is really beneficial is Jeremiah's background being a California licensed attorney and both of us being certified financial planners. We find that these topics of kind of legal entity formation and discussions translate really well as we're talking about financial topics. So, how do we kind of maximize, 401k, profit sharing, qualified retirement plans, installment sale strategies? So, when you're at that point, we've talked many times about, although it feels ironic when you start a company, having a sense of your succession plan. What are your goals here, right? If your goal is to take a company public, you're going to have a different strategy from day one than you are if you want to set up like an ESOP, an employee stock option program. So, um, the more visibility, the more sense that you have of where your desire is to steer the company, the more beneficial it will be to you as the owner in terms of how you structure the company going forward. So that's really the second part. So maximizing, protecting that as an asset. And the third is to multiply.
hmm
Multiply your investments. It's just another way to say kind of diversification.
That's right. And real estate, we talked about that already. Real estate's a real natural one to say, own your building or buy rentals, things like that. The other ones is just good old fashioned stock market investments. There's a number of folks who Main Street businesses are not always that tied to Wall Street, stocks. And so we've had people who have, great businesses and they're thriving and stocks are soft. You have other seasons where stocks are just thriving forward and their business is kind of soft and not doing so great. And having assets in both really allows you to control, your business, but also benefit when the stock market does well and the U.S. economy does well. And building up those reserves are really useful. One of the things that we also do with our business clients is when they have larger taxable accounts, they're able to borrow against those and use those funds for whatever is appropriate. And it becomes a really good way to become their own lender. There's a lot of businesses that deal with lending, as they're growing, as they're building. For some, they actually get out of that phase of needing a banker in the same way to grow. They become their own bank. They become their own lender. There's a lot of real clever strategies to make that functional for your business. So not only are you building your personal wealth, you're actually benefiting the business as you do it. So there's some real good structures that we use with a lot of our business owner clients.
Yeah, good maneuvering, kind of ninja maneuvers on that one.
Mhm.
And just to just further comment on that diversification, we have a lot of investors who want to pick companies that they know. It could be a previous employer of theirs. It could be a complementary product or industry to their own business. And so certainly we have several clients that pick a lot of stock options that they know, but we never want to leave out that broad sense of diversification. And so we utilize often different tools. ETFs are one that we use quite a bit. They're very low cost, highly efficient, and you get a really broad range exposure to different segments of the industry. So the more diversification, the more you're spreading out that risk, the more potential return and steady return you'll have over time. So just thinking about that and going back to your example of that business owner that wanted to give the business to his employees, had he not diversified and purchased the actual building, the commercial real estate property as another asset of his,
Mhm.
that would have, he essentially got below fair market value for his business, but he was still able to maximize the rent and income and eventually the sale of that commercial real estate property. So that's
Mhm.
another way to diversify. There are more, but just kind of keep that in mind as you think about building your own personal wealth.
Right.
So,
The
yeah.
the other piece I want to throw in here, and this is, a little bit a deviation, but most business owners we work with who have kids, the hard season is while they're building their business, they have young kids. And they
Hmm.
see on Instagram, they see on these different things of people taking great vacations with their kids, the business owner life and how wonderful it is. And the reality that they experience is it's a lot of hard work. And to raise kids, raise young kids while you're trying to build a business, while you're trying to communicate with a spouse, it's a lot and to acknowledge to yourself, if you're in that space, that it is a lot. And part of that paying yourself, part of that, making sure the business is growing, but also that it's providing for you personally is not just building up accounts, right? That's what we've been talking about before buying real estate. It's also making sure that you have those experiences with your kids and your spouse that you value. Does that align with your values? And so to say, hey, we're going to use this much of the business proceeds to go on some family vacations, not the
Hmm.
Instagram ones, right? Not the ones that you just there for the photo, but real moments with your kids, moments with how you're connecting with your family. If that adds
Right.
value to your life, it's hard to do both at the same time. And kids, candidly, they don't wait. They're growing up, right? To say we'll do that in 10 years when the business is bigger, you could say that constantly. And so
Yep.
to purposely make a choice, say, as we're growing, we want to invest in our family, we want to invest in our community, we want to invest in our friendships. It's such a
Because if you
valuable
let it,
piece.
your business will absorb all of your assets, all of your money, but could also absorb all of your time. And those are two of your most precious commodities, right? And so your business ultimately should be helping to free up your time as your business becomes more and more successful. How are you resourcing yourself so that you can then look for other investment opportunities? You can look for some strategic choices, vision for how to lead your company into its future or start a new company, right? But it should serve you and your vision, not just suck from you all of your time and money. So, your business should be the engine that powers your vision and not the anchor that kind of holds you back,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And especially when there's some wind in your sails, we want to see you be able to maximize those opportunities. So,
I love that. The way you said that, it implies, a clear vision. We work with a lot of our entrepreneur clients of not just what's your vision for your business, but what's your vision for your future? What's your vision for your family? And you really get some clarity around where we're headed. And sometimes in the business, we don't know. We're just trying to survive. And then it's like we're just trying to increase and grow. But there comes some good moments to think through, hey, where are we headed? Is that where we want to end up? Is that where we want to go? And if it's not, let's build a different plan. And if it is, let's double down and keep going. But it's a really good moment to create some vision around your personal life, your business life, what you want to be about, and then just take moves. Sometimes even big moves to build that. We love working with entrepreneurs, founders, people who are building businesses. There's so much excitement and there's so much difficulty all tied up together, right? And we come in as that person to bounce ideas off, that thought partner, someone to do a little bit of math, a little bit of calculating, a little bit of visioning to really get some clarity for you and your family of where you're headed and how to maximize what you're doing.
So, to our listeners and our business owners and our founders, we hope that was helpful. If you have more questions, come talk to us. We'd love to help you here at Tricord Advisors. Thanks so much for listening. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordatvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordatvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.